Take two.
We've already had our first technical difficulty. It's good to get it out of the way now.
I know. I'm happy that we just... Hey, and I feel like we remained calm.
Yeah, very calm, cool, collected.
Maybe some frustration because we had some good bits in there in the last one. But let's try again. So, welcome back.
This is Source Needed.
Source Needed is back. And today we're going to do a proper episode 1.
Yeah.
The previous episode was the prologue, which is what we're calling it. And now we're really getting into the structure of the podcast.
Yeah, using our regular format.
Using the regular format, which is 2 articles every other week, because we're doing bi-weekly, correct?
Yeah, we're doing bi-weekly.
Yeah. And we're gonna pick a cultural object and discuss that object through the lens of the articles, and also whatever tangents we go on are also welcomed, because that's what this is like the whole point is just getting lost in the plot and just getting into it. In the soup. Yeah. Indeed.
Today's cultural object is Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Which, as we talked about in our first recording, so many people have a very strong connection to.
Yeah. Doesn't mean you need to be French to have a strong connection to it, because I think if anything, the fire in 2019, which is what we're going to also touch on, showed that everybody who'd ever been to Paris was very keen to share a photo of Notre Dame, because it is such an icon. I mean, she really has taken on a life of her own.
Do you remember where you were when you...
I do not remember.
No.
I cannot recall. I mean, I think, 2019... Yeah, I was wrapping up my bachelor's.
Like April, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would have been in The Hague. But I don't remember. I mean, I remember seeing it, but I don't remember I thought it was a tragedy, and I remember seeing everybody post on it on social media.
Yeah. That's how I found out about it.
Yeah.
I had a friend who was living in Paris at the time, and she posted about it on her story, and I was like, oh my God, is this for real?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like if this happened now with AI, it might take a beat for everyone to get on the same page with it. Something to worry about but not talk about today. No, I was living in Wisconsin at the time, right before I came here to Amsterdam, and I was working in a factory. So I went into work and I talked with Rhonda, who I absolutely love. I hope that she's listening, because we always listen to podcasts together. Hey girl. And I was like, Notre Dame is burning, and I wasn't sure if it would matter to her or to anyone around me, because they didn't have a personal connection to it.
You were in Wisconsin, hun.
I was in Wisconsin
doing side quests at the factory.
Yeah, fun times. And no, she had an emotional reaction. Everyone that I told was, are you serious? What do you mean? It's very present in the cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. And also something that I mentioned in our first recording that I found was super interesting as well, is just how people want to associate with an object like that because of its almost mythological aura, or in like cultural studies we call this affect. So it's like an object's or material object's ability to generate emotional response in humans, and it's super interesting how something that's not living can produce this reaction in people.
Yeah.
And consistently, also throughout history.
Yeah, because Notre Dame's old as well.
It's very old. 1163 is when they started construction.
Okay.
And it has taken on many functions. It has a really rich history for also, the very kind of iconic figures in French history, such as Napoleon, who was coronated there.
All the kings were coronated there, and then Napoleon comes along and he's like, I declare myself king, so I'll be coronated at Notre Dame. There's a great painting actually of not his, is it his coronation, but Josephine being crowned.
Okay.
There.
Okay. I know the one of him as well.
Okay.
I think I believe that it's hanging at Versailles. It's monumental. It's a beautiful painting. It's actually, that painting was used as inspiration for Ridley Scott's Napoleon with Joaquin Phoenix. They tried to actually exactly recreate the painting. We can, for those watching, We will put it in. No, we can put it in because
Yeah.
it's a beautiful piece. I can't remember the artist either. Source needed. But yeah, I believe it's at Versailles, I think.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, he had his moment there. Victor Hugo wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is also iconic.
I think that's kind of around the time that it gained the level of like international knowledge that it has. That's how I think that's how a lot of people know it, especially with Disney.
Yeah.
I think more people would know that than anything about the kings being coronated there.
Exactly. I think, well, a lot of Americans know the University of Notre Dame. That's another little, and I don't know what the connection is there. I mean, they're both Catholic institutions.
I don't know either because it's an Irish school.
Irish Catholics. I mean, but then again, why would, well, that's something, that's
a mystery for another time.
Yeah. If you know, comment.
Yeah.
I would love to know what if there is a direct link. And what else?
Have you seen the movie, The Hunchback of Notre Dame recently?
I have seen it, but not recently. But I do know that Stephen Schwartz, who is the composer of Wicked and that musical, he also did the music for Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Oh my God. That makes actually kind of sense because Hunchback of Notre Dame is also like about what makes a person good or evil, or how they're perceived in that way. Because Quasimodo is like ugly, but a good person. And then whoever the priest is, he's a upstanding citizen, but a evil person. And throughout the plot of the film, they kind of switch their roles.
Which is like Elphaba and Glinda.
Yeah. Elphaba.
Elphaba. Elfie. I love it. I mean, I love Stephen Schwartz, and he also did other I
think he did a few Renaissance movies.
Yes, and there's also what's the one with Amy Adams?
Enchanted?
That's also him.
I love Enchanted.
Enchanted is amazing.
Really good.
So, Stephen Schwartz, you are amazing.
You got it, babe.
You got it going on, because all those soundtracks, they hit different.
Yeah. They really do.
But yeah, so I mean, it's an iconic object, and the articles that we chose today, they both really tackle Notre Dame in their own way. They're very different, but they also have some threads of commonality, which I think we also want to get into. Do you want to start with yours?
I'll go first.
Yeah, you go first.
All right. The name of my article is The Past Has Ears at Notre Dame Cathedral, an interdisciplinary project in digital archaeoacoustics by Sarabeth S. Mullins and Brian F.G. Katz. I get nervous every time I have to say archaeoacoustics. And I
did it effortlessly there.
Thank you. And I largely picked the article because of the title, because I was like, what the hell is that? I thought I was going to pick something about painting restoration, because I've seen the photos of the restoration and it looks immaculate.
Yeah, I've heard great things.
But I don't think they've published yet.
Okay.
Or it's not like easy to access.
I think they're really, I mean, so one of the people I studied with for my master's program, he's currently working for the Notre Dame. And so he actually was also speaking at the opening of it, which is like,
that was just a few weeks
ago. Nuka, and he actually posted, he was like, I peaked. I'm like, you kind of did. Like, that's so iconic. It's Macron there. I think actually Trump was also there at the opening. It was a huge kind of political, cultural event, justifiably so. And some of the images look beautiful, but indeed I haven't really, I mean, it's just what I found very striking was that the blue pigment that's coming back. That almost like what type of blue is that, like a
azurite?
Yeah like that kind of almost cobalt, that blue, deep
on the ceiling.
Yes,
that's stars. Azurite.
Okay, azurite.
Or it's either azurite or it's another pigment that is cheaper, meant to mimic azurite. Historically, I don't know what they used for the restoration. See, this is why I'm so impressed. I'm like, yeah, exactly. I would never know that. But yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. Like,
the press it received and all of it's just an incredible project. But
it received press like as it was happening, because it became it's an international story. And Macron was even like standing in front of it and giving a speech basically as it was burning, and talking about how we're going to rebuild out of the flames. Lots of
great metaphor. Yeah, and they did. And I guess that also leads me to my article, which is by Anne Gombeau. Let me pull up the title for you. Or maybe do you have it on your iPad by any chance? Okay. Instead of having to open this. Amazing. So this is published in 2020 in the International Journal of Arts Management. And it is titled Notre Dame is Burning, Learning from the Crisis of a Superstar Religious Monument. And I do love that superstar. I mean, I think for me, that description is accurate. And
what are some other churches that are like of the caliber of Notre Dame? I would also say Sacré-Cœur, maybe.
Sacré-Cœur.
Yeah.
Westminster Abbey.
I think that has the same kind of like international.
Yeah. I would even say that cathedral in New York on Fifth Avenue, which is St. Patrick's Cathedral, I believe.
Okay.
In New York. For me, that's an iconic cathedral.
I'm sure it is for people who live in New York.
And I have to check if it's actually St. Patrick's, but I believe it is. And I have gone to mass there before with one of my friends. And it was actually really nice. It was beautiful.
You know what? I get that, because when I was living in Florence, I spent a few months. I actually made a friend who was like devoutly Catholic.
Okay.
Not my usual brand, but because I was raised Catholic. I was raised Roman Catholic, and I left when I was like 10, so I didn't engage with it as a teenager. So then being in my bachelor's degree and meeting someone who was like very devout was interesting. And as an art history major ish, I was interested in like going to these churches and experiencing them the way that they were intended to be seen. So it was really interesting to go. I had like a few months there where I was going to church every single Sunday, practicing my Italian.
Look at you. That's amazing.
It was also great because
gets you up in the morning as well. Beautiful. On a Sunday. It's amazing. I mean, it's beautiful. Yeah, it is beautiful.
Intriguing to see the different congregations as well, because there's so many churches in Italy and France and Europe in general. Yeah. But those two countries specifically, maybe Spain too. Like the churches are kind of empty on Sundays. So I would be in some churches where it was basically empty, stone, cold, a few old people scattered. But then other ones that were maybe newer and they had families and actual like life to them, a little bit of vibrancy.
I mean, I think especially in the Netherlands as well, a lot of the churches also underwent iconoclasm. So during that time with the Protestant Reformation, a lot of Protestants came in, and there was the destruction of a lot of the idolatry of the Virgin Mary and anything that was kind of depicting Christ in a very ornate way, which is the very on brand for the Catholics, of course. So it's also been really interesting to see how churches have obtained different functions over time. The secular church, which is also something we see coming in like the 17th century in the Dutch Republic. I mean, for me, like, what's so also kind of special about Notre Dame is that it's always retained, except for during the French Revolution. It has always consistently maintained its very like religious function.
Yes.
During the French Revolution, I read that the Notre Dame was used as like a cathedral to worship reason, right? And it was kind of this space for Enlightenment thinkers.
That's very French.
Very French. And then, of course, when Napoleon comes back, it's like, all right, the church, we're back.
Lock it down.
Because
the Pope crowned him, right?
I think
Did he go through that whole performance? Yeah. I assume, with the kind of thing he was going after.
Yeah. So that's also very fascinating, because I think even now when we're listing some of these famous cathedrals, I don't really think of any none come to mind. There's one in Haarlem where Mozart actually played at as a child. That I've been to, but there's none that are very iconic. And I think France, because it's such a Catholic country, it has maintained this, you know. Also in Reims, you have this cathedral that Monet painted. I mean, these are such iconic, beautiful places. And what is interesting also in the articles is that they really treat the cathedral Notre Dame as this kind of space that has to continue to be venerated and very special, and
serve that function.
And that's something both authors really engage in. And also I think why they probably wrote articles on this subject, because they probably have some personal stake. I mean, we don't know, but they must certainly be interested enough in the cathedral to write about it.
Well, for my article in particular, they had the people who wrote the article are also the people that did the research into the sound of Notre Dame.
Cool. Very much
super cool. I learned about again, like you said, they included some of it in their introduction and the origins of Notre Dame. Early in its time, it was also a music school, so there's music that came out of Notre Dame, so it's attached to that. And then there have been a few different organs that have been in the church over time. The most recent one was damaged in the fire, and that was part of the restoration effort. So I love instrument restoration. It's actually pretty fascinating. I did a episode on that for the C Word, which was great, and it really opened my mind to the nuances of sound. And in this article, they talk about how they figured out that they were going to have to really look into the sound of Notre Dame as part of the restoration effort. In 2020, after the fire, they brought in a choir, I think for Christmas, to sing a song to go on national TV. And it was people who had performed in Notre Dame before the fire, and they immediately heard the difference in the quality of the sound that was happening around them.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Crazy. Because it's all the little details. It's not just the shape. It's all the nooks and crannies and how the sound bounces off of that. So going back to what you said about having a stake in it, the writers of this article certainly did, because they're also trying to proof of concept. They talk about some of the other churches that they've taken auditory scans of, and they go into some of these virtual reality options where you can get into a VR and actually move through the space of Notre Dame, and as you move through the building, it changes the way that you're hearing the sound that is playing.
Interesting.
So they did a lot of research, and Notre Dame is, because of its fame for a research project like this, it's useful in that you can... Hi, folks. We messed up. The phone stopped recording halfway through, actually a third of the way through our second try recording this episode. So there's no more visual component, unfortunately. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much, because this is actually a little secret for you. This is our favorite version of the podcast. The rest of this episode up on YouTube is going to be as usual. Sorry for this little break. Just wanted to say hi and sorry.
We don't necessarily have to make it a black screen from this point onwards.
What should we put?
Well, we could just do us.
Wait, put the mics down.
We'll just stare at you.
Yeah, we'll look at you, smiley and very happy.
And I mean, we should get this podcast down to how many minutes are we going to do?
40.
40. Yeah. And the current recording is around 50 something, 55.
So gotta nix 10 minutes anyway.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not going to be too long.
No.
And or you can just go to Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast.
Yeah. Check us out on all those places.
It won't happen again. This was a one-time faux pas.
Yeah.
We're sorry.
Enjoy. So going back to what you said about having a stake in it, the writers of this article certainly did, because they're also trying to proof of concept. They talk about some of the other churches that they've taken auditory scans of, and they go into some of these virtual reality options where you can get into a VR and actually move through the space of Notre Dame. And as you move through the building, it changes the way that you're hearing the sound that is playing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So they did a lot of research, and Notre Dame is, because of its fame for a research project like this, it's useful in that you can use that to get the word out about what you're actually working on, right? We talked last episode about the night watch here in Amsterdam. And I think we'll probably end up referencing that fairly often because similarly, some of the research that they're doing there is less about the night watch specifically and more about Rembrandt as an artist and trying to understand his larger practice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so when we document a cultural object, whether that's a painting or a cathedral in this case, do you think that because they're also taking a scan of the night watch now, and I guess they did kind of a 3D modeling of the Notre Dame. I mean, even in video games like Assassin's Creed.
That was so cool.
That's a really cool reference as well.
Do you want to explain that real quick?
Well, yeah. So actually, it's one of the earlier ones. I think it's 2004. It's Assassin's Creed. I can't remember which one, but it's set in Paris. It's produced by Ubisoft.
Oh, God, don't look at me.
I kind of feel like I know that because, well, my boyfriend, he plays Assassin's Creed, but that scan that they did or that they used or whatever rendering they made for the video game was actually also referenced by a lot of the engineers and conservators working on rebuilding the project, which is sick. Like, I mean, when it comes to preserving cultural heritage, virtual reality, video games, these digital worlds are an amazing way of documenting structures, paintings.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible. And do you think that, I mean, I guess, I wonder if you know more about this, but I mean, having enough money or resources to kind of do that digital archival process, is that something that you feel like is very accessible as of now to, like, no.
I don't think that's
I mean, would it only be something, I mean, because with Notre Dame there was so much money involved.
Yeah, you know, I immediately said no, but I'm gonna retract that because there's a wide array of technical processes, like, and they come in different levels of price and also difficulty.
Yeah.
So having a full auditory scan of the interior of Notre Dame is great.
Yeah.
But actually one of the sources that they used is just a simple test in the article. It's just a simple test where you take a balloon and you pop it inside of the space. And fortunately they had one of those from before the fire.
Yeah.
And then they took another one afterwards.
Wow.
And by understanding like the way sound bounced back to their recording device, they are able to understand a lot about what's changed about the space.
That's so interesting.
So that's a simple technique. And then when it comes to paintings, of course, like there's a whole range of processes. So
yeah,
I like the ingenuity and creativity that happens in these moments when you, for whatever limiting factor, you need to get creative.
And that's something that my author, so Anne Gumbel, she touches on that. She says crises are also moments of innovation, right? Because you have to come together to solve something. In the article, she kind of questions, she uses crisis management theory, which I was surprised to see applied to this case.
My God, I've never encountered that before. And so reading the article, I was like, I need to have a source for the source.
Yeah. And I feel like something, that's something we probably would sooner encounter in, like, IR theory, international relations, conflict theory. But I thought it was interesting to apply it to a cultural object because it also definitely speaks to how these objects are managed in governments. She kind of questions if this was an accidental crisis, or was this something more structural, or was this something that we can actually, we can blame perhaps gross mismanagement of monuments in general in France. She mentions that there's currently about 5,000 monuments that are in very urgent need of restoration in France. And I mean, I'm sure that there are many other countries who are in the same state of that. I think.
Yeah, Italy's the same.
Oh, well, I mean, a lot of my colleagues are also monuments experts, or some of them have more of an engineering background. Others are more anthropological people. I mean, it's so interesting to see how a lot of the kind of the stuff that we're interested in. So kind of the practice of documentation and the actual restoration of the object. Those moments come typically when there's like a massive renovation, or there's like the Binnenhof right now in The Hague, which is where you have the Ministry for Algemene Zaken, AZ, which is like general affairs, which is very, very like protected, very secret.
Okay.
You have the Tweede Kamer, so the second chamber is also part of Binnenhof. So this is a massive, like multi-billion-dollar project that's currently happening.
You got to build up to it.
But now is the time when archaeologists have been mobilized. You have, art conservators, you have engineers, and all of these people are coming together. And finally, the money has opened up to do the documentation and actually understand, okay, what paint was used. How did they build the structure originally? What's underneath the structure? I mean, they've found incredible, like, kind of artifacts and things, from like glasses to, an old matchbox to, remains actually, I think, underneath. And they've had to dig as well. And it's super, super fascinating. But yeah, I think like monument conservation, the big question becomes, how relevant is it to use public funding on it? What would you say is your kind of stance on that? Do you think?
Oh God, I quite honestly can't even. I don't even know where to begin on forming an opinion with that, because it's going to be dependent on each individual thing. I think that governments have a responsibility to protect the cultural heritage of their domain.
Yeah.
But depending on your government system, like the people are going to want different things.
Yeah.
But we can talk about the money regarding Notre Dame a little bit, because we have all of the numbers for like how they raised their money.
Oh yeah.
That, I don't know, did the French government pay for anything?
They must have contributed.
Given how involved they were in the promotion of the project.
Absolutely. I mean, it's also French cultural heritage. I mean, I would say that they're probably most responsible for contributing to the funding, although we see like private sector, even individuals come together.
A lot of
donate.
Individuals are why Notre Dame, the funding went through so quickly. So of $900 million, 846 million euro was fundraised by 340,000 donors from 150 countries. Again, this really speaks to like the role that Notre Dame has in our cultural awareness. Of that, 57 million was raised by U.S. donors, and those were small donations because those were 45,000 U.S. donors. So those are like
it could be 100, it could be
like.
Yeah. Is it, I mean, these are more like existential questions, but, how much do we as individuals have a duty to protect the remnants of the past? Is that something that the government should take charge of? Or is that something that also, individuals have the need to?
I think it does, whether we want it to or not. Like, that's up for debate. But I think it's a very natural human thing to preserve memories of ancestors, of ourselves. I think that happens naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think what kind of makes Notre Dame unique is, even for non-French people, there was something about Notre Dame, Our Lady, like it's such an iconic thing also in popular culture that I think that's also what kind of inspired all of the donations, and people just wanted to be part of the reconstruction and stand for something bigger. And I think it's also kind of interesting how what I mentioned, other monuments or kind of artifacts or whatever have not. I wonder, for example, let's say that one of the pyramids in Giza, if it was destroyed by, I don't know, an asteroid or a plane crash or something
Yeah.
of the like,
Yeah.
would we all start raising money for one of the pyramids?
God.
What do you think?
Wow. That's such a good question. I think probably yes.
I think so too.
I think with things like this, like people were already donating money for Notre Dame within hours. Like the money for this level of disaster comes before any knowledge of how you're going to use it necessarily. Like,
yeah.
even if there was nowhere for the money to go, people would be raising money for something of that nature.
And it's so fascinating because then the object, this like or this material item, it becomes representative of like a greater human desire to, I think, engage with the past and like something like that, you know, because in the same way that humans will come together to raise money for relief funds, you know, whether it's something like recently the LA fires or any of these conflicts. Yeah, it's fascinating to me that we also extend the same courtesy to like this iconic.
It's interesting as well that there's, especially in this case, there's like a buy-in. Like you have to have money in order to engage with the art.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me, you said something earlier, like the prominence of Notre Dame and kind of like the idea of going there and seeing it also reminds me, and like the cultural capital that gives you reminds me of the Grand Tour. So the Italian Grand Tour happened like after the Renaissance, and basically well-to-do people in Europe would go to Italy in order to do like a little tick travel list and go to all the different cities, see specific artworks, and like they would even have paintings commissioned of themselves in front of these artworks in Italy just to be able to say I was there.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that maybe we still engage with today. I think Instagram is essentially a way of kind of showcasing where you've been. I mean, it's a highlight reel of I've seen this, I've seen that. I mean, now, especially with how globalized our world has become, I think for everybody there is a desire to kind of see some of the, you know, wonders of the world. I think I think still to this day I'm like, I would love to see the Great Wall of China. I would love to see the pyramids. Like I want to see those things and engage with them and just see them in real life. And why? I think it's because these structures have such a kind of mythological power. They kind of represent something about, you know, our shared human history, and like there's stories that are told around these objects, and they've taken on a life of their own. And yeah, the Grand Tour today is probably, you know, on Instagram when everybody has like their story bubbles and it's like Italy, England, and you know, you can just like be like, I've been here, by the way, I'm well traveled, and that also that gives you something. It's also a form of identity making, and it's fascinating like that the burning of the Notre Dame was an opportunity. I guess this ties to like the beginning of where we started, and gave people the chance to be like, it's just so tragic because, you know, I was there in 2015 and I visited and it was so beautiful, and now it's burning, and oh my goodness. And
like, how much did you actually think about it since 2015?
Or when you were actually there even. You probably were like, okay, I want to see that because it's on the list of things to do in Paris. So I need to see the Notre Dame. I need to see the Eiffel Tower. And then,
that's what you do.
You don't really contemplate. And which is different than, I think, something that you touched on earlier as well, like going into some of these old churches and like really sitting there and taking time to kind of reflect on. And I think that's a different way of experiencing it.
I do remember sitting in Notre Dame. I remember I wasn't the only one, that it was it's so big. It's really incredible. That it almost it invites you to be reflective.
There's like the church can also, you could say, for example, a church acts like a museum. It does stand the test of time. And I think, you could also say the same about a mosque or a temple. I mean, destroying something like that takes on a whole nother meaning because it's the connection to the divine and it's religious, and when you destroy that, it's sacrilegious. So I think even in war, usually but not always, there is this kind of agreement between both parties. We're not going to bomb the cathedral because that's like bombing God. Like you can't touch that. We're not going to bomb a museum because that is our sacred shared human history.
I'm going to take a strange tangent and bring it back to your article. Because in terms of kind of like that, like the secrecy that happens, the ability to save information from the public, I feel like what I would have liked to get more out of from that article was like one-on-one interviews or some kind of engagement with individuals. It was a lot of the theory, which I now feel like I have a pretty good understanding of, but I wanted it to go a step farther than that. Granted, I think your article was written in like 2020, fairly recently after it had happened. And it did talk about like, as this project goes on, we'll assess.
No, I think that's a good point. I think it's the lens that they took, I think it is very, and it was also quite brief. I think it was 14 pages in total. So they had to be brief with the investigation, but I think it definitely gave me interesting things to think about in terms of also like who's to blame for something like this, whose responsibility is it to make sure things like this don't happen. And the French government has been very much keeping it under wraps who they think the culprit is and like what actually happened, because I also agree it's not really about that. I mean, obviously you don't want to make the same mistake twice, but at this point everybody has very much focused on moving forward. So that's interesting. And I think when it comes to the notion of a crisis in general, I mean, that's perhaps also just important to think about, because some crises are years in the making, and then it's like the drop that, you know, makes the bucket spill. I don't know if I said that right, but I think
straw that breaks the camel's back.
Exactly. I think, I mean, I'm thinking specifically about like the conflict zones. The violence of war is also similar in how it just like, I mean, there are actually conventions about safeguarding cultural heritage sites. Also in UNESCO, and like actually in wartime they should be protected. Like, and so when we look at like the Syrian civil war, what happened? So many sites were destroyed. There was a complete disregard for any of those conventions, and like for me that's a huge shame. And I believe that a lot of those sites should have probably received more attention in terms of rebuilding. And there are some really cool organizations that work on protecting cultural heritage and monuments. Like there's the CER, which is I think it's the Center for Emergency Response, or Cultural Emergency Response.
I'm familiar with the acronym.
They're based in Amsterdam. They actually branch off of the Prins Claus Fund, which does a lot for heritage protection as well. And
they're actually great.
They're great. They do a lot in Ukraine. They do a lot. I mean, they mobilize quickly, and they mobilize
quickly, but also they rely on the communities that are already present.
Exactly. Which is really cool.
And just try to make those bonds like stronger and more streamlined. Which is a great way to do it. Very like bottom up. And obviously Notre Dame, it was very top down. I mean, they got like the billionaires in, like right away. Immediately everyone was ready to donate money.
François Pinault, Bernard Arnault. I mean, these are big names.
That now it's like, oh, I get to be permanently attached to. Oh God, it kind of reminds me of how the Koch brothers have the plaza in front of the Met. Like, it's just, you want to be associated with culture.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing, is that wealthy people now, if they want to be associated with culture, I feel like they smack their name on something. They give money. Whereas historically, I'm my base of knowledge, I'm coming from the Renaissance.
Yeah.
What wealthy people did in order to show their wealth is they provided social programs or functions.
Commissioned.
Yeah, exactly. They engaged more. I think that, God, I just want to see more wealthy people like having a cultural exchange. It feels very one-sided when it's just money. It's
interesting because from what I've learned or seen or experienced is that, you know, François Pinault, he's a huge name in the French art scene. He has the Pinault collection, which is based at the Bourse de Commerce, which opened.
Is this the Condé Nast guy?
Moving on. Could be. Yeah, he is. I mean, he's very like engaged with a lot of different cultural entities in France. And then there's Bernard Arnault, who's from LVMH. He has a massive art collection. He also donates a lot of money. I mean, the Fondation Louis Vuitton is also part of or falls under LVMH, and they, I mean, they do like programs with artists. They commission work. I mean, also François Pinault, his collection is predominantly contemporary art, so he collects a lot of big contemporary names, which I think is super cool. I mean, so it's not like there's less of that per se. I do think perhaps the scale, I mean, back also in the Renaissance period, the Pope was a huge commissioner of artwork, of course. And sadly, religious institutions don't have that same role, at least to that extent, as they used to. Also because that wouldn't make any sense for like can you please make a new mural of Jesus? Like that, I don't know.
It doesn't work in the 21st century.
It doesn't really work.
No. But then again, and then
I mean, isn't Notre Dame kind of still that? I mean, it's a religious institution, and people still wanted to donate to that.
Yes, but it's not like new art was getting created out of that. Although they thought about it for a little bit. They thought about doing a few different things to Notre Dame. The public hated that. Yeah,
I think in the video version of this podcast, we need to put some of the images for ideas that
they were out there, very contemporary ideas. But this also goes into some of the history of Notre Dame, because the spire on the back of it was added in the 1800s during a restoration at that time. That was a full restoration of the church. And so it's not at all original to the church. And it's one of the things that burned down very like theatrically during the fire.
I do remember that.
Yeah, and so one of the first things that Macron was like, well, let's think about all of the options that we have, was maybe we could do a contemporary spire or some kind of different thing, because it's not original to the building.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, and that I can get behind. But I think how they ended up going, like the final of what it looks like now, I think was the right choice. Yeah. Because I saw some of the plans for the spires that some of the architects had come up with, and I was
very radical.
I was like, ooh. I mean, even like the Tour de Montparnasse, which is the one tower in Paris, I'm not a huge fan of that. I think Paris should just be one I mean, no, it doesn't have to be entirely uniform with like the Haussmann style, but I do love like the old kind of vintage feel of Paris.
It's got a good vibe.
I don't need like, I'm glad there's not more skyscrapers there. There's just that one tower. We don't need any more of that.
No, and a lot of cities have that as well, where like old cities have it that you can't build above a certain height, or within a certain zone you're not allowed to build any skyscrapers. Paris has really been able to keep its charm throughout the 20th century. Yeah.
Whereas I think a city like London has become very much a hodgepodge.
Yes. Or New York. New York was always kind of designed to be that way.
And was always going to be that.
Yeah. You've got St. Patrick's right next to a skyscraper. Which I also appreciate in a different way. Yeah. New York's fun in that way. Yeah. But it doesn't need to be every city. I feel like Tokyo's probably also like that. I've never been to Tokyo.
Me neither.
But I get the sense from what I've seen of it that it's also sort of like the really, really old next to the new.
Well, even like Rotterdam, because it was bombed.
Yeah.
I think any city that was
Transformation.
bombed or kind of suffered that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's old and new combined, which is very cool.
Yeah.
But
I think we're getting close to the end of the episode.
I'm like,
do we have anything else we wanted to talk about?
I thought your article was really interesting. Thanks for bringing that one to the table.
Thank you. I learned a lot from it, actually.
I mean, I never thought about the acoustics, and then I think mine was more of a theoretical.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of.
But
take.
Both of them were fairly recently after the fire.
Yeah.
They were written. And like, even though the topic of them was about a particular thing that had nothing to do with each other, the commonality between the articles was like how the emotional response to the fire shaped whatever the article was about. Like your article in particular, you can't separate the emotion of the fire from the disaster response, especially because the emotion was so raw right as it was happening, following it. And then my article kind of went into like the emotion, the potential to create emotion that acoustics have. And
also the desire to kind of bring back the original sound.
A specific sound. Very specific
sound. Yeah. So I think it was cool. I liked, the 2 article setup. We'll continue with that for sure. That's how we're going to be doing this.
We're going to be reading a lot.
And then,
I hope that you read along with us.
Yeah, we'll put the sources in. And for those joining us on Patreon, we'll also have
get over there.
The sources on there as well.
If you only have like the mental energy for something short, I would highly recommend there was a video, actually a YouTube video, we'll link it, that was made for my article that covers basically the whole article in about 10 minutes. Yeah, I thought that was really great. Did you watch that video?
I did not.
No.
But yeah, guys, all right, we'll see you next time. Let us know in the comments what you think about this subject. Do you have a personal kind of stake in this subject? What were your reactions? What did you notice?
Where were you when Notre Dame burned?
Where were you? And do you have plans to go see it if you're ever in Paris? Like, will it be on your list?
I'd like to go see it. Yeah. Are you gonna go?
I think my plan is to go if I can manage to get tickets. Yeah.
Oh, it's ticketed.
It is ticketed.
Is that new since the fire?
I think because there's such a demand to see it. Yeah, they've introduced, and actually you can only get the tickets the day before you want to visit, and you have to enter a queue, and it's just like a whole thing.
Oh, wow.
But I'm really curious.
What I've seen from the photos, it was so dirty before, and now it's really clean. It reminds me of like a hotel lobby in some ways.
Actually, for the next episode, I will quickly share my thoughts.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Although I wish, because I never saw how it was before, because I'd never been inside before the restoration. But
you can find some photos.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see.
Yeah.
So,
do you still feel the sense of awe?
Yeah, or does it feel a bit too polished?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap it up here.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao. See you next time.